Good morning, everybody. Before we start, I was listening to this documentary um, from the 60s or the 70s, and it grabbed my attention. The guy said, this student, from this PhD doctor came to say, doctor, isn't it funny how silly people were in the past when they used to think that the sun used to move around the earth instead of the other way around. And the professor very cleverly said, as a matter of fact, they're standing outside and there's a sunset behind them, all that. And he said, it is very funny. How do you think that they would have experienced that? And that was to be a bit of a sarcasm because the experience is no different. They still would see the sunset and the sunrise and everything would be the same. But the moment that they realize that no, it's the earth that moves around the sun, the whole universe of theirs changed, because from there we created GPS and all these things, right? So that there's a perspective change because of information, whereas before the information was relative in one way and it became relative in a different way. And in a way, this is kind of segue for what we're talking about today, because it's about information that you don't have or have makes a difference, right? If they still thought that the sun was going around Earth, we wouldn't have GPS, for example. We wouldn't be able to send, ships into space like we're capable now because of this change in our personal universe. Now, the universe itself didn't change. It's still, the laws of physics are the same. Everything is the same, but the information that now you have is different. That makes a whole different story. So that was the one before we get started. All right. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being here and listening to me mostly. Now, question. If someone that lives alone takes a fall in their kitchen, gets hurt, can't get to help, right? Because they live alone and they don't have resources, technology or whatever to get to where they need to go. How long you guys think that they can stay there and still survive? 3 days. Anybody else? No. 3 days used to be what I would think. And then can't remember how many weeks ago, but within the last 4 weeks ago, in a hospital showed up a man that was 11 days laying on his bathroom floor. Lived alone, hermit type, not many friends, not worried about falling ever because we all have a telephone right there. So there's no way I cannot get to that telephone because every day I can get to that telephone. The only reason why we think this man survived is because he learned to drink water from the toilet. He wouldn't have made it. No one would have made it 11 days without water. Not to say that he got to the hospital in shambles. To be honest, I didn't follow with him, so I don't know if the man survived, but he had open wounds to every bone prominency already from laying on hard floor. And I don't want to make this whole thing today about falls, but I want to make it about communication and about technology. And the reason why we talk about these things primarily is this. I was thrilled to have become a physical therapist when I was a young man. I'm sure Robert felt the same way because we were about to start helping people. And here's what would happen. I'll go help one person, and then there'll be millions of other people falling, or millions of other people breaking hips or having strokes or whatever the case may be. And I just help one at a time. And it comes a point where it's like, we have the tools that we can put to use, where we can actually help way more people, way faster, way better. But not only after the fact, we can start helping them before the fact, right? Just like your weather forecast, for example, it'll tell you before it's going to rain, not after it started raining, like it used to be in the 70s and 80s, right? And it's gotten pretty good, right? Weather forecast has gotten to the point where last night was a good example. It says it's going to start raining in 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes it started raining, and it says in 5 minutes it's going to stop raining, and in 5 minutes it stopped raining. Now, they're not right all the time, but they are darn right most of the time. They don't hold any secrets. That is not a recipe just of theirs. That's mathematics. That is a bit of computer intelligence and the ability to calculate a lot of data, right? At the same time and make it fast. The reason why the older guys on television would only be right like 51% of the time is because the amount of data that they had to go through, they didn't have computing power to come up with everything. And then, of course, they developed new mathematics and forecasting functions and things like that. But the main thing is that if you are given enough data and enough computing power, you can come up with incredible solutions for the problems, right? So what happens if you start driving your car and the check engine light comes on? Typically, most people, if they like their car and don't want to have to buy a new one, they go have it checked, right? Now, some people let it go for forever, and then what happens is just you end up having to fix the car, right? What happened before we had that engine light on our dashboard is that we didn't know, right? So by the time you know is because the car is already failing. So now you know it's going to cost you a little bit more money to fix. And the difference in between then and now is like before is like the sun used to go around the earth, and now we know that the earth goes around the sun. Before you didn't have a dashboard with sensors on your car, now you have a dashboard with sensors on your car, right? Now, the most valuable thing anyone has, I don't care how rich you are, it's you and your health and your body. And we still don't have a dashboard for it. So when we title this thing, these talks that we have, different ways of keeping you out of the hospital. And here's what happens. We have plenty of things to get you out of the hospital. We don't have much of it to keep you out of the hospital in terms of technology. Like you can go see your doctor once a month, once every 3 months, or once every 6 months, or once a year like I go, and he'll run labs on you and he'll check on you. But for the whole year, you don't have a dashboard. You're running your car on luck. Hopefully you don't smell any burning. And there's no smoke coming out of the hood and things like that. So in as much as I would like to have a laundry list of things to tell everyone, says, hey, you could have this and this and this and this and this, and then you be in good shape and you're going to be out of the hospital. And then the idea is to keep you out of the hospital forever. Not a good business deal for the hospitals, but they've been making good money for a good while, and they're needed when they're needed. But if we can prevent you from having to go there in every way possible, that is the goal. And now there is technology that can do that. Just like in 5 minutes, you can tell it's going to rain. If I were to tell you that movement is like the grease of the universe, everything has to move. What would happen if Earth and the sun stopped moving through space? We probably would lose time. There will be no time. We'll probably all die, right? What happens if your heart stops beating? If things need to be moving for it to be working. You can tell the time because the sun rises and the sun sets. If you didn't have a clock or a watch, you can still get a pretty good idea when noon is and when sunset is and when the sun rises. The reason why we can do these things is because of movement. And I may be losing you a little bit right now, so I'm going to make the analogy of someone walking through that door. If I tell you that someone walks through that door, sick, extremely sick, about to drop, and you all right now are actually visualizing someone that could be walking like this, because humans do that. I tell you something and you try to see a picture of it, right? If I tell you a red house, in your brain for a flash, there was a red house of your construction. And if I tell you it's a blue convertible Corvette, you saw a blue convertible Corvette, right? Yeah. So if I tell you then now someone else comes in through another door, and this person is the happiest person alive because they won the lotto and they married the love of their life and found out she was pregnant. And you already can imagine how that person looked like, right? What most people don't realize why they look different is because they don't stop to think. Why? Because it's not their profession, it's not their job, it's just how our brains are wired to be. Our brains keep us alive by making assumptions on these things. Back in the savannah, back in the day, or if you still live in Africa savannah now and you on a tribe and you need to cross and there's some lions back on the back and they're lazy and sleeping and they're not looking like they're hungry, maybe you try to run from one tree to another tree. So they're not going to come after you. But if they look like they're on the prowl already, you think twice before you expose yourself to that lion. All these things, the sun rising where you can tell the time, the guy walking in sick, the happy guy that just got married, and that lion, what your brain is picking up on is movement. Your brain is picking up on the movement of the sun. Your brain is picking up on the movement of that person walking in, including movement on their facial muscles. The same for this one guy here, and the same for the lion. And it's motion that your brain picks up on to teach you about your environment and about what is going on. And I always tell the story of when I got my first wristwatch when I was 12 or 13 years old. I don't remember if it was my birthday or for Christmas, but I got this watch that I loved it. Got it from my parents. And I put this watch on my wrist and I could feel it very heavy, and I was sensing that watch for days. I could wake up and it's like, if the watch wasn't there, I would know. If the watch was there, I was like, my mind was on that watch. And that didn't last. And I'm sure you all experienced something of that sort. And what it is my brain was taking too much energy thinking of that watch for me to be functioning. I could possibly be eaten by the lion or get run over by a bus because my focus needs to be on the world, not on the watch, right? And the brain knows that. And as soon as it learns certain things, it puts on background mode. And now I even forget if I have a watch. I can leave the house and then later on I go like, and there's no watch because I forget. Except we build habits where we actually do this thing, put a watch without even thinking. You don't even remember if you put it on or not. This is the difference in between you driving a stick shift for the very first time or you hopping after 20 years of driving on an automatic car. You don't think about anything. You don't think about putting the sequence of anything. Even if it was a stick shift, I could drive a stick shift even if I'm half asleep. The brain does that to save you energy. So you can focus on what matters. Your brain's primary objective is to keep you alive, not let you get eaten by that lion, right? So because the brain puts that on the background, it's the same thing that will happen to us as life is changing. So for the ones of you, and you guys heard the story of the boiling frog many times, you're familiar with the story of the boiling frog, right? How you boil a frog? No? All right. Hopefully, thankfully you didn't boil a frog, but that's not the experiment. But the concept is like to boil a frog. There's two ways. You can boil water, toss the frog in there, and what that does is a very drastic change for the frog. An immediate change in lifestyle. Frog doesn't like it; it jumps right out. Right? It's very sudden onset and is a very drastic change. Not successful for the guy that wants to boil the frog. The smarter guy that wants to succeed boiling the frog puts cold water and lets the frog swim in it and then lights the fire under it, and it warms up slowly. And by the time the water is too warm, the frog is also too weak to jump out. And unfortunately for the frog, now you have a boiled frog, right? And that is the analogy that we're using here, is that is kind of like our life goes. So, you're a young man or a young woman, and then all of a sudden you're not, right? But this doesn't happen overnight, right? We don't grow gray hair overnight. Our muscles don't get weaker overnight. We don't even get sick overnight most of the time, unless it's something sudden. Something sudden would be if I trip on these cords because I'm not paying attention and it's a drastic change in my lifestyle. I perhaps was strong, fit, and healthy, but I tripped and I fell and I bruised myself. But if over the years, little by little, I'm getting just a tiny little bit weaker, my balance is a tiny bit less, my vision is a little bit less, my hearing is a little bit less, everything is a little bit less, until all of a sudden, the cumulative effects of these things now makes it for a big deal. And then I'm a little bit too weak to jump out, right? And that's an opportunity for us to correct. Where I cannot be on your ear says, watch for that cable, don't trip on that cable, right? There's not going to be anytime soon technology for that. Like if you don't pay attention as you're coming in, walking, and you trip on those concrete things that tell you where to park, a lot of people break hips on those things. If I'm not there to tell you, I doubt it that your Apple Watch will, right? But your Apple Watch can be watching as this water is warming up to boil the frog. And it can be telling you this water is a little too hot. You need to either cool off the water or you need to get out. And it can start doing things like that. And it does that because it can read motion. Whereas there are certain devices, like the device on your pocket is a supercomputer. The device on your wrist right now is also a supercomputer. But if you can create an app that recognizes that you have a body, in other words, it's an app that is actually sensing you, this app can do things to inform you about your body. Whereas a telephone, which also has sensors, sometimes it's on your left pocket or on your right pocket, or sometimes it's on your purse, sometimes it's on the table. It's a bit confusing for that to know that you have a body. And if you pay attention to what technology has done up to now, the boom of technology that we had in the last 10 years, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's things that don't really matter or care or recognize that you have a body. So these companies are really competing for your attention. They want your attention. They want your eyes on it. It doesn't keep you out of the hospital. It creates good community. It connects people that, don't even know each other personally, but they may be friends across the world. And it's of value. But when you get sick and you need your neighbor to bring you soup, it's not your Facebook community that brings you soup, right? It's your community that brings you soup. It's your neighbor that brings you soup. And that soup may keep you out of the hospital, right? There's an array of sensors in there, and these sensors are picking different forces. When I say forces, these are forces caused by movement, right? So it's acceleration of one type or another. So there's linear acceleration from the accelerometer. There's angular acceleration for a gyroscope. And there's calculations with it without gravity. How's gravity hitting this device or not? So all these forces picking up from these sensors. All these devices, not all of them, but most of them have most of these things. And they are just putting that out there on its own for anybody. And that won't do anything for you. So the analogy here is these devices provide you with ingredients for you to build a cake. So think of it, you could have flour in your pantry and sugar on your pantry and chocolate on your pantry and baking powder in there. And if it just stays there, well, it's still just flour, sugar, cocoa powder. It's not a cake, right? Now you can take those ingredients and you can make a cake that's your recipe. And then you make your cake and that's your recipe. And they're going to be different cakes, right? Even though the same ingredients, right? But you combine them differently. And that is precisely what we figure out that we can do. We can take these ingredients because we understand movement. Kind of like I was saying, the earth moves around the sun, not the sun around the earth. It changes our universe when you understand that. Understanding that everything that happens to you translate in movement. But it doesn't have to be that drastic because the changes on these sensors are so sensitive. And how many times in the hospital people would just tell me, I just don't feel good. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't feel right. And we all experience that sometime or another. Now, just because you saw, one butterfly doesn't mean it's spring yet, but you start seeing a bunch of butterflies and all of a sudden it is spring, right? So just because you don't feel right just right now for a few seconds does not mean that, we need to send you to the emergency room. But if it's picking up on certain patterns and this is repeating even before you noticed, now we could raise a flag for you and say, good idea if you go see your doctor before this gets out of hand. Or something even simpler than that, maybe we notice that your balance is not doing so good. And you can fix that yourself right at home just by being told, it's not that good. This is how you fix it. How about we help you? And by what I mean is you and your watch on your wrist. We went on a nearly impossible mission, which is to be the first guys to come up with a system that bakes a cake, basically. So I'm not suggesting that we are in any way, shape, or form rocket scientists, but we can bake a cake with the data that we know. Because first of all, we know that the sun doesn't go around the Earth, right? So our universe has changed. And because we've been studying movement for over 30 years, each of us, we understand movement very well. If you can have these sensors picking up on these things all the time, they will pick up before I can pick up. As a trained professional, I won't be able to be that refined, that granular on looking at data like this. Okay. So we started talking about falls, but this is not about falls. This is about everything, because everything is movement. Your movement basically has a signature. If I take twin siblings and they each one walk, each one has their particular signature. And this signature can be collected, can be read, and can say, oh, this is this person, not this person, just like a fingerprint, right? It's exactly that, is that refined like a fingerprint. That is a static, right? If you look at a picture of yourself when you're 12 years old, and you look at a picture of yourself now, and you give it to a human, says, is this the same person? Odds are they say, yeah, that's the same person, it's just older, right? But it's still the same person. So your signature today and your signature when you were 12, very similar. Although gradually, like the boiling frog, your height change, your weight change, your flexibility change, your strength change. So there's a gradual change there, right? So because of these changes, it needs to be adapting. Like your fingerprint maybe start wearing out because you're using your hands a lot, or not, or the other way around, you stop using your hands and now your fingerprint is a little bit thicker, but still the same fingerprint, right? So we take this technology, we compare you and identify you. So this is your signature. This is how you are right now. And it keeps on comparing you with yourself, right? But if you started using this technology when you had caught COVID, that is not your norm signature. That is your sick signature, right? But because it's observing this signature of motion all the time, it's learning with it. And at the same time is looking at you, your signature from yourself, comparing you with you, is also looking at norms that are available on how people your age and your gender that live in this part of the world, how do they score? How is their signatures look like in general terms? And it's comparing both things at the same time all the time. And from there, we can make a ton of assumptions. When the signature changes a certain way, it could be that you just gotten weak. When it changes another way, maybe your balance is off. If your voice signature changes, it could be a stroke. It could be a cold. It could be that you just woke up, right? But with enough computing power, we can be calculating these things and observing these things and making sense of these things so that we keep you out of the hospital, that we keep you from taking these boiling frog falls, that there is any sign of anything that is not right, that we can get you to take action out of your own will early enough so that you will be the fittest, because it's the survival of the fittest, right? It's not the unfit that survives, it's the fittest that survives. And we're all here because we are the fittest, right? The ones that weren't fit, they're not here to listen, right? So we want to be even fitter so that we'll be here later even, and not just miserable. We'll be here feeling good about it, like enjoying what we have to enjoy. And let me tell you, there's nothing enjoyable about being in a hospital. I have never had anyone tell me that. And I've seen a few thousand people in the hospital, right? And every single day, at the very least, one of them, if not all of them, are there because they took a fall. And they thought their telephone would save them. Many times, most of the time, people that live alone and do fall is because of some very nice neighbor that came check on them, or a kid that checks on them all the time. So imagine this situation: you go see your doctor and they check your blood pressure. And some of these blood pressures go super sky high. because some people, just from being in a doctor's office, their blood pressure goes up. Now, the doctor goes in and says, well, let's not make rain yet. It'll come back in a month, we'll check your blood pressure again. That is called lab coat syndrome. When you come back again, the guy's still wearing the same darn white coat. And your blood pressure goes up again, and now he's got 2 records of you being hypertensive. Depending on how aggressive and how much time he has and how much patient he has and how many patients he has to see, he'll make a call then, or he'll have you come back again just for your blood pressure to be high again. And if there's enough proof that your blood pressure is high, that physician is compelled to give you medication for that. So he'll give you blood pressure medication to lower your blood pressure. Except when you go home, your wife is not wearing a lab coat, and you love her. She's not raising your blood pressure. And your blood pressure now is a little bit closer to normal for you to be taking that medication. And after a while from taking that so much, your blood pressure is too low, you get up to walk to the bathroom and you pass out. Every single day, there's someone I would tell you that there's somebody walking in the emergency room right this second from that. There's somebody walking in the emergency room because they just took a fall and got caught 3 days later, right? Because there was no way to know any history of that unless you're measuring your own blood pressure and taking notes to bring it to your doctor, which your doctor would actually appreciate, because it's all about having the right piece of information, right? But if I tell you that you would have to do that with your blood pressure and with your blood glucose and with all your movement, if you have tremors or you don't have tremors, if your heart rate is right, if it's off, your temperature, your voice, your cognition, everything, you would need a table of computers, and that'll be your full-time job, because you do nothing but just calculate those things and keep tables of those things. Except now that all of you have a wristwatch that could be doing that, except no one baked a cake for it yet. It can be doing these things for you all the time. It already has the ingredients. It's actually shooting ingredients right now, sitting on your wrist. This is throwing them out. There's nothing happening with them. There's nothing being baked with it. The ability to make these things occur where you catch things before they are out of hand, or if they already went too far, that gives you some way to approach it. Now, first of all, you can't have technology practice medicine. A physician practices medicine. So whatever technology we come up with, it is not practicing medicine without a license. What we're doing is we're telling, hey, take this to your doctor, because he will have to make sense of this for you. But we know this is not just right. And he will decide what this is. So you give that to your physician. Your physician will have something to go by. But we're trying to give tools for the users to have to stay out of the hospital, and for the physicians to have to be able to practice even better medicine by having the right information. Information they can collect all the time. Remember, I said all your devices are shooting that. You probably have a phone on your pocket, right? Your phone on your pocket is also picking up on that. Yeah, I hear it, but that's okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna put my computer. This is going a long way. It's gonna go from my wrist to my phone to my computer to the television, and then to your eyes. This app I'm gonna show you is useless other than just for demonstration that you are of those ingredients. Okay, so let me use the watch itself here. I'm gonna go to that little app that I made just to show this, because people sometimes don't grasp the connection in between. How can someone walking happy be picked up by the watch, right? And it picks up because it picks up motion. So, so we made this little demo. So you see some dots in there, right? I made these. You can't see it? Okay. That help? Can you see it still? All right. So those dots are not moving very much because I slowed them down, because I can change the sensitivity on this where it shows you everything, like it will do 100 times a second. And then all you see is things vibrating because it's too fast. They're blinking in and out too fast for the eye to catch. But if you noticed that I just moved, I slowed down a lot just for you to see these things, right? Now, if I move a certain way, See how it's similar? Because it's the same similar motion, right? Now, now it's a different motion, right? So if I were to be walking, it would be a certain thing, you know. I could come around like this, and it would be a different type of motion. If I were to, scratch my head, it would be something else. So this is just to illustrate to you. I made it only 10 times a second, so it's like it's kind of slow for a computer. You can move much faster than that. That is just this has no use. You could fall just as well. Where this app has no use. Okay, this is just for illustration. And I think you saw it before, and it was all we made it prettier now. It's colorful now. It wasn't colorful at the time, but that's just to illustrate it. I don't want anybody to think that this has anything to do other than to say you have chocolate on your pantry and sugar on your pantry and baking powder on your pantry, but you don't have a cake. So you all have this going on your wrists, but there's nothing useful yet. No app yet recognizing you have a body and then doing something with it that is of use. Uh, very good. I think I was told to talk about that. I like that question a lot. And I used to tell people, and I thought, like, they look bored. I don't know that they're interested in knowing. So I stopped talking about it. I love this question. First of all, it's very helpful because it's one syllable, right? Quick, simple. But finches are birds, and birds get bird eye view, right? They have a bird eye view of the thing. That's one thing. The next is one of the species that Charles Darwin used to describe his theory of evolution, amongst many species, was the finches of the Galapagos Islands. And he described how they evolved and adapt to their environment according to their needs, and by the survival of the fittest, like we talked a little bit earlier. And he would demonstrate that finches in one island, because of one type of food, had beaks different than, one just a few tens or hundreds of miles away with different beaks. But they were still the same finch, but they started to change, right? So that's to illustrate that evolves. Well, this finch also evolves. The finch that you put on your wrist for the very first time is the dumbest finch you ever have. It will have information for 7 days. Even though you haven't had it, it will go back 7 days. And the reason for that is when people buy these watches, they think they just have the watch. With that watch, you also have some cloud with it. You don't know. That's why the watch looks a little bit magical sometimes. Like you can do things. It's like, how does it do it? Well, it's very powerful on your wrist, but it also has its cloud. And in that cloud, it has some of the chocolate and the flour, right? And we can go there and says, I'm baking a cake and I need more chocolate. And I just go to your cloud and I get some of that chocolate. Okay. And everybody knows the term the canary in the coal mine, right? The canary in the coal mine is a system of early warning, which is actually a true thing. They used to carry until the 80s, they used to carry in England and here in the United States as well, a small canary in a cage to save miners from getting poisoned or go through an explosion from gas in the mines. So it's early warning. Same thing as our finch. And finches are a type of canaries. So it all kind of ties together. Almost too good to be truth when we came up with it, because it's like, one syllable, bird's eye view, early warning, and evolves. So that's the reason why it's called finch. The main thing is that I know this is something useful is because I made this for me. I have parents that live 4,800 miles away, and Robert has a father that lives about that far from us. And they're getting older. And as they're getting older, I'm a physical therapist. I understand a little bit too much for comfort. That things, however they tell me they're fine, and things are changing. There's a boiling frog going on, right? And to some people, you're intrusive to ask all the time. Plus, you don't quite get the truth, right? When you go see the doctor and you feel all better already just from being there, then you tell them, I don't feel so bad. Why are you here if you don't feel so bad, right? Your assessment, it's almost not as important as what your body tells. Your body tells the truth. Your body won't lie. If you are hurting and you're trying the best you can not to limp, we'll still see it. You will not make it. You're still gonna limp, right? So your body will tell way more than you care to admit. So because I know that my parents would like to not have a conversation with me that says, "Okay, Dad, Mom, we're gonna sell your house. We're gonna put you on assisted living." And if my father is close enough to me, he'll probably grab me by my collar and said, "Try me," right? And that's not a conversation I would like to have either. But at the same time, it's a stressful situation because I'm so far. It's not like I can jump in a car and be there in 20 minutes. Where if something happens, they're on their own. But if this boiling frog here has a thermostat and a thermometer uh, and control over the fire under the pot, this frog here may never burn. This frog will just have a hot tub, which may enjoy it quite a bit. So the idea is that we get to our golden years and we enjoy it. Like I get this every day in a hospital where people look at me, to my face, and I know. They don't have to tell me, but I let them tell me because they need to get it out. And it says, it sucks to get old. They say it just like this. It just sucks to get old. But once in a while, there's someone that comes in. Like I can't remember how many months ago, I had a 106-year-old man who lives alone. And he never said he sucked. He said, I live alone, I'm proud of it, and I'm going to stay that way. Okay? That man still drove a car. It scared me a little bit to know that. But that man, and he has family. He's not alone. That man is 106 years old, and he doesn't think he sucks. He's a lucky man. If we can help one person not lay on the floor in the kitchen floor for 3 days or, God forbid, 11 days, and one person feel that it does not suck to get to 106, that you actually would like to make it 107, 108, and 9, and 10, because you're enjoying it. Because if you're not enjoying it, you want to end it. But if you're enjoying it, you want more of it. If we can help one person do that, if I can help one set of parents not go to assisted living because they can still be fine, independent, proud, and safe. If I can help one kid feel at ease, says I don't have to be on my parents' neck trying to find out and hug and bother them because I can't be there, and now I'm going to force them to do what they don't have to do or they don't want to do. If I can help one of these, mission accomplished. This is not a very easy concept. I can just say 2 words and you know what I'm talking about. It's because it's a bit different story concept that if you had heard it before, I could just say it's something like that. I'm making a motorcycle. It's like a bicycle, but it has a motor. You don't have to pedal. If I tell you that, you know what a motorcycle is, if you've never seen one, right? If you have a horse buggy and I say, well, it's like a horse buggy, but it doesn't have a horse. It has an engine that makes the wheels go. You may have never seen a car, but you knew a horse buggy, and now you know what it is. If I tell you this is like a Fitbit, it's not. Fitbit does nothing. It counts beans. It counts steps for you. So how many steps are good to take? How many steps should you take?
I don't look at my watch very often.
There you go. Everybody thinks it's 10,000 because 10,000 got popular. Nobody knows. It's just made up. 10,000 is good, but for my 22-year-old son, that's nothing. For that 106-year-old man, that's a bit too much, maybe hurting him.